With President-elect Donald Trump set to take back the White House, there are certain industries that investors expect to benefit under his administration. For example, financial stocks may get a boost from a Trump administration as he eyes banking deregulation. One of the ways investors can take advantage of these sector-specific bumps is ETFs. For more, we have Todd Rosenbluth, who is the head of research at TMX Verify, as part of this week's ETF report brought to you by Invesco QQQ. Great to have you here in studio with us, and thanks for taking the time, Todd.
Of course.
So let's talk about this a little bit more, and let's start perhaps there on the banking sector. Where are some of the ETF plays that you imagine investors would be apt to at least see where there is component leaning towards deregulation and the biggest beneficiaries of deregulation?
Right, so there's the Financial Select Sector Spider ETF, the ticker is XLF. That's the largest. That's the S&P 500 financial stocks diversified across industries. So it has banks, insurance companies, brokerage firms. That's a logical play for many folks, but we are seeing interest in those more targeted, industry-oriented ETFs. So the Invesco has a bank ETF, the ticker is KBWB, and so you're gonna get more concentration into the multinational banks as well as the regional banks. With exposure there, and then you can even target specifically the regional banks. I think KRE is actually, as you showed earlier, one of the better performing ETFs today. That's a Spider S&P regional bank ETF. You're gonna have more exposure to some of those smaller companies. So if deregulation happens, the financial sector is likely to benefit, and there's always an ETF or three to get exposure to.
Now, on the other end, we've also been hearing, of course, campaign talk on the road to reclaiming the White House from President Trump about rolling back some of the Biden administration policies, whether that be in chips, whether that be in other clean energy investments that have been made. So where are some of those ETFs that investors are perhaps already positioned in or keeping tabs on that they would be apt to perhaps, all right, put on the back burner for right now?
Yeah, so clean energy is an area that I think people were leaning towards and looking towards. And so there's a number of those clean energy ETFs. Interestingly, clean energy ETFs and the solar-related ETFs actually did quite well under the prior Trump administration as opposed to the Biden administration. But we do think energy is going to be in focus, and so the energy sector in particular, and so drilling, exploration, and production companies, XOP is one of those larger, equally set up, equally diversified across small and mid-cap companies. And actually, one of the better performing ETFs in the energy sector is the Alerian MLP ETF. The ticker is AMLP. AMLP has actually been outperforming the broader sector. It's focused on midstream companies, higher quality, free cash flow oriented companies. And so that's probably a good place to invest, and you don't have any exposure to S&P 500 companies. MLPs just are not part of the S&P 500.
Yeah, you know, one of the other things that's been in focus, and that we've had a few conversations over the course of, several conversations over the course of this morning about, is the roll-off of the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and where that needs to be renewed. And depending upon where the House of Representatives ultimately comes in at, it could look like a red sweep or carte blanche for President Trump to really go about day one trying to make sure that that gets highly prioritized. We know previously that had led to massive corporate buybacks. Could we see the same? And if so, are there any ETF plays out there?
So we certainly could see the same. Companies tend to use their cash to support their own business and buy back stock, their free cash flow. So Invesco has a buyback ETF. The ticker is, I believe, PKW is the ticker on that one. And so it owns companies that have been buying back their stock roughly 5% over the last 12 months. So that's, again, a backward-looking approach as opposed to a forward-looking approach. And it's diversified across the sectors. Or you could focus on free cash flow-oriented ETFs. And so your prior guest was talking about small caps. So Victory Shares has a free cash flow ETF, SFLO. Companies that have strong free cash flow are more likely to have the ability to buy back stock. And that's a way of playing the small cap buyback theme together in one trade.
Just lastly, while we have you here, we've also been discussing what potential tariffs or the added tariffs might look like for an inflationary picture here in the U.S. Is there an inflationary hedge ETF play that investors can consider as well?
So there's a handful of ETFs that have inflation in mind. One that I think of is PPI. Astoria is the asset manager behind that ETF, and it's a multi-asset approach. So it has exposure to gold, it has exposure to some of the sectors that can benefit from it. Horizon Kinetics has another ETF, INFL. That's another way of playing that, that's equity focused. There's an ETF or three for just about every investment idea.
Todd Rosenbluth, who is the TMX VettaFi Head of Research. Todd, great to see you. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you.